Hola a todos, hello everybody.
Hello, everyone. It's a huge pleasure to welcome you to the session number 5 of the World One Welfare Virtual Conference. I'm Deborah Rachati from Argentina, from the University of Buenos Aires, and I'm going to be the moderator of this session with you. And we will be talking about this specific session 5 framework of the One Welfare approach. We'll start with the keynote, and then we'll have a series of oral presentations, and finally we'll have our awesome sessions that will be absolutely awesome, as the name indicates. If you have any questions, you can ask questions in the question and answer section. You can write them down, and you can vote the questions that others have made that you really want to see the answers. And then we'll have a Q&A, short one, after the different speeches. So if we do not have enough time to answer your questions, we'll send you the answer written down later on. So without further ado, I'm going to start with our keynote. We have with us Craig Spencer, and he's with Colette Goveni from the Black Mamba, South Africa. They will be talking to us about biodiversity conservation and the impacts on animal, human, and environmental well-being. So Craig Goveni, this is your turn, and I'm going to leave the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Deb. This is my colleague and sergeant and my most senior member. Has been with us for 9 years, Colette Ngobeni. She's going to help me to present because I think she knows more about what's going on in the field than I do. So the Black Mamba Anti-Poaching Unit, it's quite a privilege for us to have been invited to present to this audience today. It's quite a nice and unique audience, and I think it fits in very nicely with what it is that we're trying to achieve. As we know, poaching is not new. It is an animal welfare issue, but there's a lot of socio-political and socio-economic issues that need to be addressed. So there's causal factors. Do we fight this with guns and bombs and Belgian Malinois dogs in night vision equipment and militarize the national parks? Or do we try and understand what is the causal factor for this? Why is this such a third world problem? And what is the long-term vision? We can't live forever, Colette and I. How do we make sure that we leave a legacy of resilience for the animals? These are our partners that you can see on the screen at the moment. And interestingly, the legitimacy of the Black Mamba program comes from the Department of Environmental Affairs in South Africa, who are co-funders and supporters of ours. And the host agent is, of course, the National Parks Board, because we are sitting in the Greater Kruger National Park. Okay, that is a map. This is 3 million hectares in total, which is the size of a small European country. In fact, you can probably fit 1 or 2 countries into the national park here. And we are operational with the Black Mambas in this light green area. The park is 400 and something kilometers in length from north to south, and it spans 3 different countries, including Mozambique and Botswana. And it's ironically only 3% of the entire surface area of South Africa. So, when people say, but, we need to, there's 56, almost 60 million people living inside South Africa, and only 3% of the entire country is captured in the Kruger National Park. So this is our Swiss bank account of the free-ranging, big 5, charismatic, iconic animals, if it makes sense. So I just want to see if I can activate my pointer. Yes. All right, so there we go. That's our area of operation, this light green. Okay, Mozambique on that side. There's little Kruger Parky over there. It's really very small, but it just gives you an idea of how big the country is and how big the pressure would be on that little piece of land wedged up there amongst all the international borders. Oh, somehow the lily bounced off there. So, Colette, tell us, what are the Black Mambas?
The Black Mambas are young women coming from the different communities. We are 36 rural African women we are 36 sisters and mothers, aunties, wives, and future grandmothers. So on that 36 sisters, mother, aunties, wives, and future grandmothers, I'll explain like this. Because for every woman, it's a kickstart of protecting what they have or what they love. So because us Black Mamba's Anti-Poaching Unit, we love nature, we have natural love of nature. So, and we are teachers and leaders. So from the communities, because some of people from the communities, they have that mindset of wild animals belong to white people, while it's totally wrong. Wild animals is nature, it belongs to everyone. So we teach the people in the communities to change their mindset so then they can understand. We are ambassadors for our wildlife and communities. So in the communities, we are their role models. When they see us, it's like the front mirror of the community. We are the front mirrors of our communities.
Very good. Thank you, Colette. That is awesome. Just to give you an idea of where the Mambas fit into a typical compliance model, okay, this on a basic X and Y axis, if this is the level of, I hate to use the word ability, I would rather use the word risk level. And then here on the, sorry, that's the Y axis. On the X axis, we have the amount of hectares covered every day. So the Black Mambas fit in as the bobbies on the beat. They use their eyes and their ears. That's their skills. They cover vast hectares. You can see it's the base of the pyramid. They are all over the show, on foot, in vehicles, sitting out in the bush at nighttime, listening. They are everywhere in your face. They're gathering information. They're reporting back in real time. And they search and destroy poachers, snares, and camps before animals are caught. So keeping a high presence, and they develop this institutional memory, which means they can say, there goes the guy that drops his child off at school every single day. That's the guy that I know well that comes in and delivers the food to the gate. But that vehicle, I don't recognize. Let's go and see what's going on there. That's the institutional knowledge. And also that that kinship and pseudo kinship that they build up. And then, of course, there's the higher, it's a smaller group of people. You can see the majority is down here. Smaller group of people that don't cover a lot of ground, but that is the tactical response team that will back up the Mambas. If they detect anything or there's any danger from poachers or wild animals, the tactical response team will go. And then there's really just 2 or 3 of us sitting here in the operations center where the information gathering network is maintained as well. So this is the intelligence network. We don't want the intelligence to come from the bottom up as it would in a traditional system, because this would compromise the Black Mambas when they go back home into their community. So if they were being Scarlet O'Hara and running around gathering information and spying on their neighbors and so on, it would actually undermine the work that we're trying to do to build trust and faith in the community. So that's why our intelligence network comes straight from the top and then goes down, if that makes sense. Often people ask me about that in the law enforcement arena. All right, so there's a bunch of Mambas standing on parades. Something that's very important to me is that we selected women because women bring a lot of values into the arena that men don't have or have been forgotten. So when we employ women, it's not a win, or it's not a victory if we train the women and deploy the women as men. And you'll see there's a lot of similar projects that have sprung up all over the globe. We want to celebrate the fact that these are young women and they have brought a set of values that were lacking into the wildlife conservation and animal welfare arena. So I like the fact that they dress up beautifully for their parade, that they're proud to be women, that they will wear earrings and lipstick to impress us on the parade. No shaven heads and war paint. Thank you very much. These are mothers. These are wives. They need to look good. When they go home, they need to look good in their communities, and then because that's what a role model is all about at the end of the day. Hey, Colette, do you want to say something about this?
On adding on what Craig was saying, because women, I will say we are more secretive. And then again, I mentioned that we have a kickstart of love. And then in the communities, there are a lot of companies where they don't deploy women. They said there is a job of men, there is a job of women. So we were lucky because we've proved the world wrong, that women can do anything as long as they're dedicated to it.
Exactly. So the coalition mission statement, obviously we can't do this alone. You saw all our partners, and that's only some of our substantial partners. What we're trying to achieve is to make the Greater Kruger Park the most difficult and undesirable place to poach. The way to change human behavior in the law enforcement arena is to increase the risks. Okay, and that's not necessarily the risks of being shot or whatever. It's also the risk of coming in and going home empty-handed and therefore having wasted a lot of your time. And then we desperately trying to build this proud and sympathetic community on our borders that are proud of the natural environment, that are proud of the national park, proud of what it stands for. And I think we can build, I call it environmental patriotism, you know, something similar to what Greta Thunberg is trying to achieve for the entire globe. You know, we want environmental patriotism, people that feel patriotic about these iconic species. You can see the old traditional law enforcement strategy down here, where you dress up in a ghillie suit, hide away, and then jump on anybody that walks past and bash them around a little bit. And then you've got the Black Mamba approach. I like the yin and the yang here, you know, and this is in the community. So the Mambas are 50% in the bush working with the wildlife, and 50% in the community working to mobilize the community. And, you know, it's more of a kind of passive approach rather than creating a rift between somebody wearing this uniform and the community. It's, I'm going to try and find the arrow to move it along. However, having said that, and be that all as it may, this is what the Mambas have to deal with on the landscape every day. It's a little black rhino. It was shot in this. I don't like putting these slides in. We try and move away from these shock and horror slides, but I do just want to bring it to everybody's attention that it's not honey and roses out there, that we do have a crisis. We do have to address it. Little black rhino, as you know, is our most endangered rhino species on the landscape, and the brutality of it. If we talk about the society's norms and standards and what is acceptable on our moral compass that we have developed over thousands and thousands of years of domestication and whatever, when you see an animal like that has been brutalized, and it was obviously still alive when it had its horn removed, because they cut right into the nasal cavity, the whole rostrum has been removed, and the heart was still beating, the blood was all over the show. That animal died in absolute agony. Then the little elephant on this side, it's a young elephant as well, caught in a snare. This is a poacher's bullet with a gun. This is the other technique they use, is to set a snare. A bullet is a very focused killing tool. You're going out with a gun to shoot a rhino. There will be no collateral damage. A snare set in the bush is indiscriminate, because any animal that walks into it will be caught. Even an elephant, if the snare is made out of a thin wire, an elephant will still die in a thin wire, whether it's a warthog, an antelope, or an elephant. And then it's a long, slow, and very, very painful death. It's a tragic set of slides, this. Can't find the arrow. I want to go away from that. Thank you very much. So, you know, we needed baseline data to start off with, to say, what is the perception in the community? You know, do we have a problem? Should we just fortify the park, build up a barrier, or perhaps we can remove the last of the boundary fence, let everybody run around? What is the scale of the problem? These are our focal communities that live directly on the western boundary, and this is the values that they have attached to the different, my dog running in and out. This was a collaborative research project that we did with the Living Desert in California, Dr. James Danoff-Berg and his team, to be repeated every 4 years. So it's coming up for renewal next year again. And you can see that the value that is placed on animals for hunting and money is quite big. They do value the national park. This is on a score out of 10, by the way. They do value the national park because of the jobs and everything that it brings in. They value the big five because of the value that it brings in with tourism. So we thought, yay, there's actually, you know, there's something that we can do. It's a very low value for food and money. So there's an opportunity for us to get into these communities and do some work. There's an example. Okay, what's going on here?
Okay, in the morning every day we have different teams. The first team, they go to the fence to patrol. The second team, they go to sweeping. So in sweeping, it's where they go into the bush to remove snares. So snares are wires that poachers from the communities, they set for bush meat. So this is example of snares that my colleague is holding. So it was last week, we even had poachers in the reserve. So these snails can cut anything, elephant, impalas, or anything. So these snails, it make a lot of damage inside the reserve.
Yeah, thanks, Colette. This is by far the biggest threat to wildlife in this context here. Bullets, we lose very little animals in the greater scheme of things to poachers' bullets. This is the proven and tried and tested capture method, or poaching method, if you wish. And it's not a South African problem. It's not unique to South Africa. You will find this probably anywhere in the world. And that wire you can steal from a telephone line or from a fence. Anyway, this little picture over here, that's another young elephant. The snare was around its neck, and over time it just cuts in further and further through all the muscles and the tendons and what have you. This elephant was darted. That's why the ear is flapped over the eye, by the way. It's just to keep it dark and whatever. And we can still repair this. Our vets are incredibly good at what they do because they've had so much experience. We will spare no expense. However, it is cheaper for us to remove the snare if we want to talk about economics. It's cheaper for us to deploy Mambas to remove these snares before they catch an animal than to wait for it to get to this. This is a very expensive operation. This involves helicopters, airplanes, veterinarians on the clock, paying per hour, etc. And the risk is that you only get an opportunity to treat that animal once. This is a massive landscape. When we treat it and we wake it up again and we send it on its way, you might never see that animal for a retreatment. So you get one chance to fix that animal. And you also don't want to keep stressing the animal out with helicopters and darting them from the air, immobilizing them and fiddling. We have been very, very successful. The wildlife vets in this part of the world and probably most other parts of Africa are superb. They will operate, they will reattach the muscle fibers and send that animal on its way. And they have a very high success rate. Okay, just a quick example. There's a lot of speculation in the media and the press all over the show that because of the pandemic, poaching has gone out of control. That is not the case in our neck of the woods. This is when we deployed the Mambas. We were deployed a little bit earlier, but when we started occupying the Baluli landscape more and more. So in the beginning, we deployed a small team of 6 Mambas, Colette and her colleagues, just to demonstrate that the program was effective. Then we expanded across a much broader landscape. So that's when the statistics are actually worth looking at. And you can see that at the peak of the snaring, it was 2018. And you'll see a similar graph. It seems to show a similar trend with the rhino poaching as well. So this is just the snaring. It's dropped and spiked, and here we sit. This was the pandemic. Okay, at the height of the pandemic, you can understand that people were hungry. I'm trying to interpret it the best I can. And so far in 2021, the snaring seems to be much less in the same areas that have been patrolled on a consistent regime. If you want to gather information like this, you have to say, I'm very consistent in my data capture regime. I can't go to a different area, find a whole bunch of snares because I've never been there before, and then suddenly claim that there's a lot more snaring on the landscape than there was before. And then you can see there's always a spike towards the end of our winter dry months. That's when the people are at their hungriest, when there's no other food on the landscape. Then I think the snaring goes berserk. And that's now, this time of the year. Have a look at the rhino poaching statistics as well. On a similar, it peaked at the same time that the snaring peaked, and then it started dropping off at the same time. So both poaching methods had a similar trend, which I think is very interesting on our landscape. Here's just some more anecdotal stories of other high-value species that are compromised with snares. Even a small antelope like that, little impala, right around the midriff over there, we will still take the trouble to try and fix it. This African wild dog. Wow, man. You know, to see something like that. And that's not a target animal. That snare was not set to catch that animal. But that animal got caught. And when the poacher comes back and he finds a wild dog in his snare, he's not going to ignore it because there's still value in that animal in the traditional medicine market. So the feet and the teeth and the ears and the spleen or whatever, you know, they will still carry value in the local community, in the traditional medicine. There's a little rhino. With the rhinos, because they're so endangered, we will put a foot collar on after treatment so that we can track its progress. That's one animal that we can't afford to take a risk and say we might never see it again. In this year, you can see the amount of animals that have been through snares that have needed our assistance. And we would like to think that this is going to get less and less as we go along. Again, just some interesting pictures. This was a road incident, by the way, where a car hit this baboon, shame, broke its pelvis, etc. Wild dogs seem to be particularly prone to snaring. It's a self-destructive species. Okay, very quickly. Statistics like this to me are like bikinis. You know, what they show is important, but what they're hiding is essential. But if we look at what is happening here, this is the community level financial benefits from the big five. It's, you know, unfortunately, you would want to separate these statistics to say what is the difference between a consumptive and a non-consumptive financial benefit. So there is trophy hunting happening in some of these areas, luckily not where we are. You know, so I can imagine that that is a tangible, quantifiable return to the community. They're getting meat, they're getting paid for their services, whatever. And then you've got the other areas that don't have trophy hunting, just tourism. And you can see, but it's all mixed up in here, which is why it's difficult for me to interpret this. But, you know, it's nice. In the communities where we have deployed the Mambas, that is Maseki in particular, we have a 93% community financial benefit. That's how they perceive the big five. And yet there is no trophy hunting here. All these other areas can't claim the same. And there's a bit of a 50-50. So this says to me that there's a shift in the values. People are valuing the animals differently in the areas where the black mambas operate. I'm no social scientist, by the way. I'm just trying to interpret these graphs the best I possibly can. And you can see this, this shift as well. It'll be very interesting to do this again now during the pandemic. But, you know, personal sport hunting for food, still a big thing. Hunting for money, still a big deal. It's not the biggest deal, which is pretty good. Look at this, personal value of the game reserves. Because the game reserves create jobs and skills and status and what's the word I'm looking for? Human dignity, you know, and all of those cool things from the big five landscape is still trumping over the other things, the other values. What's happening?
So what do we do prevent poaching and illegal wildlife trade? So in the morning, we go out in the reserve and then to R40 to check the fence, because fence is the place where poachers are used. So sometimes they cut the fence to go inside. Sometimes they just pull up the fence and then go inside. And then sometimes the animals, they dig down to go outside. So we close the holes when we find it. And then the aim is to detect before the incident happened. So here, our colleagues were at night patrol, because at night we don't walk. We patrol with vehicles. So we use the spotlight to shine. So people, they can see that we are there to patrol. So, but in the morning, we walk.
So yeah, visual policing for us is very important. Disrupt the landscape. Activity, activity, activity. If we lay and hid in the bush and waited for the poacher to come past and bounce, you know, that's not really what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to say, guys, this landscape is hot. It's too dangerous for you to come in. You will be detected and we will track you down and we will chase you out before you can do anything naughty. And these are just some of the other routine activities that are up to. Can you explain a few things? Yeah?
Okay, on top, it's a roadblock because we have gates in our reserves. So in the morning and afternoon, we go to the gate to stop the vehicle to check if any suspicious things that they have. So here, because educating people or education, it helps. So we have this program, we call it Bush Babies, but the runner it's Luwayne Maifela. But even us Black Mamba's Anti-Poaching Unit, we go there to assist her by explaining to the young children from the communities, so then they can educate their parents so they can stop poaching, because a lot of people, they don't understand what is poaching. So when we go to the schools and educate them, they take that information back at home to educate their parents. So here, during this pandemic, because I will say a lot of houses or a lot of families, they were, some of them are in the reserves.
It's Sosha. No, sorry, that is our anti-poaching dog that has come and greeted us now.
So a lot of them, because of this pandemic, they were not working. So we go to the communities to help them with the food parcels. So we deliver food parcels in the communities in nearby the reserve.
Especially now during the pandemic, it became quite clear that there were 90 families. A short little survey, a little audit on the social security in the area showed that there were 90 families that had the propensity to turn to bushmeat poaching to survive during the pandemic. And therefore, the food parcels was one of the interventions where the Mambas go in and deliver with vegetable seeds. So now there's a whole bunch of these vegetable gardens that have come up all over the landscape, which is nice. And the Bush Babies, part of their education program with the Mambas is to grow massive vegetable gardens, to teach sustainable agriculture, so that the people don't go hungry and don't have to set snares in the bush. And there's some more examples of the terrible things that happen around here on the landscape. These are some very recent events, by the way. But it's really important to remove these things before the animals get caught. Crime prevention. Once again, I'm going to whiz through these so we don't run out of time. You can see the more we put the poachers under pressure, the more inventive they have to become. It's a homemade weapon using all kinds of bits and pieces. That gun actually killed 6 rhinos before we managed to take it off. We have a, part of our animal welfare drive is a canine unit. The dog just came to greet us, the one on this side now. So we work with dogs, domesticated dogs that are well trained, imported from Germany with our partners from Recht das Nashorn, trained by the Frankfurt Police Academy. So they're specialist animals for detection purposes. And there's a number of values that a dog has on patrol to protect the ladies, as a visual deterrent to poachers and what have you. But the agenda is broader than that. When we in the Northern Hemisphere or in Europe and what have you went through thousands of years of domestication, we have placed different values on our domestic animals. They can become pets. My dog is lying on the couch now. But when you go into the rural communities, the animals have a different set of values. The domesticated animals are functional. They pull your cart, they keep the jackals and the predators away from your chickens, so on and so on. So there was a different or a lack of, that extra value that says, or that moral compass that says these animals are also subjected to pain and stress and so on. So it was really important for us to get I want to go to some pictures, to get a canine unit started so that the ladies could bond and see that dogs are actually capable of feeling stress and they can bond. And you must carry that message back to the community as well. Part of the Bush Babies program is to make sure that anybody that has domestic dogs looks after them appropriately and properly and names them and bonds and so on. We cannot be protecting free-range wildlife animals on a 3 million rand hectare, 3 million hectare landscape when the people in the village don't respect the domestic animals at the same time. There's donkeys that pull carts to get the kids to our education program. Those donkeys had to be sorted out and there had to be a whole lesson plan around looking after equines and donkeys, what are their needs and so on. And that goes all the way through to the cattle. It's a critical part of our intervention, I believe. You cannot separate the wildlife and expect people to carry a moral compass and say that it's wrong to kill wildlife if there isn't the same moral compass in the community with your domestic animals. I believe it starts with the domestic animals. And only once you've figured that out and attached the values to them will you be able to say, shame, it's really sad to put an impala or an antelope in a snare because it's going to be suffering. Okay, there's a whole lot of stuff about the bushmeat. Again, what I wanted to say with this slide was we have to be tough on even the gateway crimes, as I call it. Any antisocial behavior is unacceptable. These are poachers' camps. This is the meat of the animals drying in the sun. Now, they're always in the thick bush where the vultures can't see it. The Mambas have pulled out many of these camps, broken them down, and chased the people off the landscape. Once we never, what's the word I'm looking for? We never conclude a crime. You can't get rid of a crime, but we can displace it. Our technique is not going to put poachers in jail necessarily. And the reason for that is that those poachers are fathers and brothers and uncles. And if we take them out of the community, we're actually putting more pressure on the young women who must now look after the household single-handedly. And we give the upper hand to the crime syndicates who are going to move in and start giving them food parcels, and basically taking over with gangsterism and so on and so on. So we've noticed that by pushing the poachers out of our little neck of the woods, they've now started doing other terrible things like cash in transit heists and so on. It's also high value crime, but at least it's not affecting the wildlife. And now that's something that the police can deal with. They know how to deal with that.
Lamento muchísimo interrumpirte. Disculpa, si pudieras ir terminando en los próximos 2 minutos.
I apologize, but you need to, you're running out of time. You need to conclude, please. If you could just finish your presentation, because otherwise we are not going to have time for the questions. 2 minutes left.
All right, so there's some statistics on what we've managed to achieve. It's been quite a good haul. There's some of our classrooms. Classrooms first had to be upgraded. There's our animal welfare program in the communities where the people can bring their dogs. We insist they give them a name. They must revisit us, body mass index, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole big drive for the domestic animals in the communities. As I said before, there's some of our fantastical vegetable gardens that have been grown now recently. And, the whole idea is you cannot place an animal's life above a human's life. That is a very privileged position to be in, where you're not worried about where your loaf of bread is coming from tomorrow, so you can consider the welfare of your dog that's chained up under the tree. So, until we are addressing issues like this, where that gentleman cannot support his family and his sons will go out and poach a rhino to make ends meet. The cultural beliefs versus kindness or moral compass. Traditionally, some animals carry a kind of voodoo, to have a cat is a scary thing. Cats are the instruments of black magic and whatever. So they'll be stoned, thrown out, chastised, whatever. We are not trying to be the conquistadors here, but we are just trying to change, a few perceptions, the role models, the pride and the dignity. That's our Rhino Orphans. Say something quickly. You've got 30 seconds.
Okay, on the Rhino Orphans, we have an orphanage where the mothers were killed and then the small rhinos were taken to the orphanage. So some of the black mambas were there some of the mambas were there to foster the rhinos since they have love. So because they have love, they treat those animals like their own babies.
Yeah, great success story that as well. We've released some of them again after 5 years. They're back in the bush. Just read that. That's Felicia Mogokani. She was also one of our very first Mambas that started with Colette here. And I love that statement of hers. Okay? We don't want to live in a village of orphans and widows. But at the same time, we cherish all the wildlife.
We cherish all the wildlife. Because in the village, we don't want to see the widows that were killed by the rangers. That's why we don't carry guns. We need to protect life of human being and life of wild animals. So we need to protect all of them.
They won an award. They're great. They're mothers. That's the most important thing. It's multi-generational. If you invest in a young woman, you're going to get at least 3 generations down the line until they are grandmothers and so on and so on. It's a fantastic investment. And that is the end of our slideshow. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry we rushed it at the end, Deb.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias. Desde aquí un enorme aplauso virtual.
Thank you very much. We want to give you a very huge virtual applause. You are like heroes, you women. My congratulations, because your work is great. I just want to ask you, what is your biggest challenge? What is the biggest challenge that you face or that you've been facing throughout the years? And what do you think are going to be the challenges of the future?
We're asking questions now. What's happening?
Do you need I repeat the question? I would like to know what is the most difficult situation you have to be through during all these years working on these amazing things you do.
Colette, that's for you. The biggest challenges.
Bueno, los retos.
The biggest challenge is when you wake up in the morning, go outside, and then going to protect the wild animals, knowing that you might come back or not, because poachers are not our friends. So, and then animals, you can't predict them, but we are well trained. So that is our biggest challenge.
The dangers, the risks, yeah. I would say as the manager, I would say our biggest challenge is trying to finance the entire program. The vehicles that they must drive are 30-something-year-old Land Rovers now that break down repeatedly on drive. So that's one of the risks that we have to try and mitigate, is if you're in a herd of elephants or you're chasing after poachers' vehicles and your car breaks down or it doesn't have brakes. And we just don't have the resources to repair, especially during the pandemic. It's been a nightmare. But we haven't missed a single day, huh?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Colette and Craig. Now we're going to move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
Pasamos
very much.
entonces a las presentaciones orales. Recuerden que pueden.
So we are now moving to the oral presentations. If you have questions, we are going to answer to the questions after. Our first speaker is Adeline Lerenberg and Mark Jones for Born Free in the UK. They are presenting One Welfare and the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, which is a very interesting topic. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Mark Jones. I'm a veterinarian and I'm head of policy at the Born Free Foundation. And I'm giving this presentation on behalf of myself and my colleague, our international policy specialist, Adeline Lerenberg. And I'd like to talk to you today about One Welfare and the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and in a wider context to explore why animal welfare matters for biodiversity protection and why consideration of animal welfare should be fully incorporated into relevant international agreements. First, a brief word about the organisation I'm representing today. Born Free was founded in 1984 by the actors Virginia McKenna, Bill Travers and their son Will. It's a UK-based international wildlife protection charity, and we promote compassionate conservation in order to enhance species survival, protect natural habitats, respect the needs and safeguard the welfare of individual animals, and ultimately to keep wildlife in the wild. As many of you will be aware, the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, or CBD, entered into force in 1993 with three main objectives. They are the conservation of biological diversity, the sustainable use of the components of biological diversity, and the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising out of the utilisation of genetic resources. It's in the process of developing its post-2020 global biodiversity framework, which will replace the 80 targets for biodiversity set out in its strategic plan for 2011 to 2020, none of which have been fully achieved. The global biodiversity framework is really important since it will effectively establish international policy aimed at halting and reversing biodiversity loss for the coming decades, and by doing so, inform strategy and policy at a regional and national level. The process of negotiating the goals, targets, and indicators for the framework has been severely delayed by the COVID-19 pandemic, but is expected to culminate at the 15th conference of the parties to the CBD, now scheduled for spring 2022. Born Free, alongside like-minded organisations across the world, has been engaging with the process of development of the Global Biodiversity Framework from the outset. Among our key objectives for our engagement is to encourage the CBD and its member countries to integrate animal health and well-being into the goals, targets, and indicators for the framework through the adoption of a One Health and One Welfare approach, with the rationale that such an approach is critical in order to reduce zoonotic disease risk and help tackle the biodiversity and, by extension, also the climate crisis. We are also seeking support for the reframing of the sustainable use narrative, which, as I indicated earlier, is one of the three core objectives of the CBD. Through the incorporation of a recognition that in order to be considered sustainable, use of wildlife should be humane and should not compromise the well-being of any animal, in addition to it being demonstrably sustainable from a biological and ecological perspective. We believe that this would represent a significant change from the current highly anthropocentric definition of sustainable use and could serve to significantly improve outcomes for animal welfare, wildlife conservation, and human and animal health. There is already significant recognition of the importance of incorporating animal welfare and well-being into international biodiversity policy among some influential actors at an international level. In the United Nations Sustainable Development Report in 2019, it stated strong government should safeguard the well-being of both wildlife and domesticated animals, with rules on animal welfare embedded in international trade. And in Professor Dasgupta's final report to the UK Treasury, following his team's review of the economics of biodiversity, he identified improvements in the enforcement and regulation of wildlife conservation, animal welfare, and public health regulations among the solutions to reducing future pandemic risk. The current draft of the Global Biodiversity Framework contains goals, targets, and milestones designed to set a path towards the ultimate vision of living in harmony with nature by 2050. The goals are focused around the three core objectives of the CBD, with targets centered on increasing protected area coverage, controlling invasive species, reducing nutrient losses and pollutants, developing ecosystem-based climate change mitigation processes, eliminating incentives and subsidies that are harmful to biodiversity, and mobilizing resources for biodiversity protection. The framework also incorporates a theory of change process, which is currently heavily focused on securing the integrity of ecosystems, preventing species extinctions, and protecting genetic diversity in order to secure people's needs and ensure equitable sharing of the benefits to people from ecosystem services, with the ultimate goal of living in harmony with nature. Yet, critically, there's no specific reference to animal health or welfare in the first draft of the Global Biodiversity Framework, and we believe it lacks the transformative changes to the business as usual paradigm that are vital if we are to avoid ecological collapse and the threat of future pandemics of zoonotic origin. So what's the rationale for incorporating animal welfare considerations into international biodiversity policy? Well, for a start, I think it's true to say that COVID-19 has really brought the risks that wildlife exploitation and consumption pose to human society to everybody's doorstep. Crowding, stress and injury among wild animals in trade provide the perfect environment for pathogens to spread and mutate. And the close proximity between animals and people during capture, farming, transportation, butchering, processing and trade creates many opportunities for disease transmission between individuals and species of both wild animals and domestic animals, and potentially onward transmission to people. So we believe that consideration of animal welfare is absolutely key to reducing zoonotic and pandemic risk, but we also believe it's vital to halting and reversing biodiversity loss. In this regard, there is increasing recognition of the complexity of animal culture and social structures, particularly among higher mammals. There's some really interesting work being undertaken on this under the auspices of the Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals, or CMS, which started with studies of sperm whales and now extends to other highly social taxa, including great apes and elephants. If our conservation efforts fail to recognise the importance of accounting for culture and social complexity among these and other species, they are likely to fail as the well-being of animals within populations reduces and their social integrity breaks down. So in order to try to incorporate these considerations into the global biodiversity framework, we're promoting changes to key aspects of the current draft. First, we're promoting changes to the CBD's 2050 vision in order to incorporate respect for the intrinsic value of wildlife and biodiversity and the need to recognise that the implementation of the framework should aim to benefit all life on Earth, not just the lives of people. With specific reference to Target 5 in the current draft framework, which is on wildlife harvesting, trade and use, we're pushing for changes that would recognise that wildlife use should be well within ecologically sustainable limits and safe for human, animal and wider ecosystem health and well-being by encompassing the principles of one health and one welfare. And we're also pushing for improvements to other targets in the current draft framework, including Target 4 on species conservation and human-wildlife conflict by emphasising the importance of coexistence and respect for individual animals and their importance to wider ecosystem health and function. And Target 6 on invasive alien species by promoting the need to minimise welfare harms through the application of, for example, the International Consensus Principles for Humane Wildlife Control, which was published by Dubois et al. In 2017. In terms of the opportunities we have to promote our recommendations, we've just been engaging in the latest open-ended working group meeting to discuss aspects of the first draft of the Global Biodiversity Framework. And the output from that meeting will help to inform discussions going forward within that open-ended working group and within the technical bodies which advise the Convention on Biological Diversity, which are due to meet later this year or early next. Ultimately, the Global Biodiversity Framework will be presented to the Conference of the Parties of the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is due to take place in spring 2022, and which will consider the documentation that it receives for adoption and implementation. Ultimately, we believe that only through recognition of the inherent interlinkages between human, animal and environmental health and well-being and the incorporation of one welfare principles into international, regional and national policy can we hope to tackle the crisis facing biodiversity and mitigate the future risks from zoonotic diseases and pandemics in order to provide a secure future for the people, animals and all life on Earth. So thank you for listening, and you can find further details of Born Free's calls for a transformative approach to nature's protection through the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework on our website. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Realmente esta es un.
Well, thank you. This was an incredibly interesting and relevant presentation because of the topic. Mark is not here with us today, unfortunately, but we have Adeline. So I haven't seen any questions yet, but in case you have any questions, we have Adeline with us. She's ready to answer any questions or comments you might have. And without further ado, we're going to leave the floor to our next speaker. We have Michelle Campbell-Ward from the Department of Regional NSW and Taronga Western Plains Wildlife in Australia. And Michelle, if you're ready, we're ready for you.
Hello, I'm delighted to join you today to explore the outcomes of the rescue and rehabilitation of wildlife during the so-called Black Summer bushfires in Australia. I would imagine that regardless of where you are based around the world, this event made the headlines. It spanned a period of approximately 6 months, from September 2019 through to February 2020, with a peak over the new year of unusually intense, severe and widespread bushfires in many parts of Australia. And the statistics are quite shocking. An estimated 17 million, perhaps more, hectares of land burnt. This is the largest area burnt in a single recorded fire season for Eastern Australia. 80% of the Australian adult population was affected either directly or indirectly. Tragically, 33 people died. Greater than 7,000 firefighters were deployed. Over 3,000 homes were destroyed. 80,000 people were displaced. 70 countries offered financial and/or practical assistance on top of countless private citizens. But arguably the most astonishing statistic is that an estimated 3 billion wild animals were affected, making this one of the worst wildlife disasters in modern history. The fires were the culmination of a period of nervous anticipation for the community. We were well and truly seated in our new geological epoch, the Anthropocene, an era in which human actions are affecting and influencing all life and all systems on our planet. 2019 was the driest year on record in Australia, with many parts of the country suffering an extended drought. The map of the country here indicates the rainfall deciles through much of 2019, with red coloration corresponding to below average rainfall and the deep red areas, the lowest ever recorded. This is a land of creatures and habitats adapted to meteorological extremes, and yet there was a distinct sentiment that this was escalating rapidly into something very out of the ordinary. Meanwhile, in the field of psychology, discussions about the emergence of new conditions such as ecological grief and climate distress were being murmured. For many people, climate change was evolving from an abstract scientific concept into something directly affecting their well-being. So to provide some context, let's look at the pre-existing wildlife rescue and rehabilitation process as it stood at the onset of the fires. In Australia, wildlife rescue and rehabilitation is carried out almost exclusively by volunteers, numbering in the order of 20,000. The work undertaken is self-funded, and research has indicated that the numbers of rescued animals is increasing and that the cause of their troubles is overwhelmingly anthropogenic. Wildlife rehabilitators are supported by a network of veterinarians, some with specific postgraduate qualifications working exclusively with wildlife in purpose-built hospitals, and others in general practices. Much of this work is done pro bono. The principles of triage for rescued wildlife in any scenario, bushfire or otherwise, firstly consider the immediate and future welfare. Limited resources must be used wisely. Relevant factors that can influence decision-making include the species status, legislation, human health and safety, and prognostic factors related to the specific injury, illness, or circumstance, including the identification of a suitable habitat for release. Surveys of veterinary personnel and wildlife rehabilitators across multiple states were conducted in the aftermath of the Black Summer to firstly document the most significant animal welfare issues encountered, and secondly, to evaluate the most significant factors that influenced animal welfare adversely in this natural disaster response. The surveyed veterinary personnel were a mix of those who worked in a paid versus voluntary capacity in assessing and treating bushfire victims. All the wildlife rehabilitators surveyed were volunteers. There was a variable mix of experience in both groups, ranging from those who had not been involved with wildlife much before, through to those with decades of expertise. The vast majority of animals rescued alive and presented for treatment were koalas and, to a lesser extent, macropods, that is, kangaroos and wallabies, with a distinct large marsupial bias, even though the post-event data suggests that other species groups like birds, reptiles and amphibians were adversely affected in vastly larger numbers. The animal welfare concerns cited by the survey respondents were ranked, and here is a brief compilation of the most common. The bold text refers to primary issues raised by both veterinary personnel and rehabilitators, and the regular text to those that were key focus areas of one of these groups or the other. These included, first of all, not surprisingly, injuries and pain, including smoke inhalation, burns, capture-related myopathy, and fractures, and problems that developed whilst in care. Secondly, poor quality of care for some, including inadequate use of pain relief and anaesthesia for animals undergoing painful procedures. There were concerns about prolonged suffering and captivity with delays in euthanasia or release. Fear and distress and psychological suffering, starvation and dehydration, animals finding themselves in unsuitable environments, either in the wild or in captivity, and an inability to exhibit normal species-specific behaviours. Of note, collectively, these encompass all 5 of the established animal welfare domains. More than 45 potential contributing factors to the aforementioned animal welfare concerns were identified. Here I've listed the top 7, and the most frequently cited by both groups, again, are listed here in bold. A lack of knowledge, experience, skill and training, including lack of access to or ignorance of established wildlife care guidelines, was the top concern. This was either relevant to well-meaning members of public or inexperienced personnel. Secondly, habitat loss and displacement was a major concern, as well as the provision of inappropriate diet and housing. In some areas, there was a high case volume that stretched resources. A lack of leadership and poor communication, coordination and support concerned rehabilitators. There was difficulty accessing wild animals in the field safely, and veterinary advice was in some situations ignored or intentionally not sought due to fear of euthanasia. Some of the factors that contributed to positive outcomes included recruiting experienced wildlife vets and an open, honest approach to community transfer of information with strong community support for the work being done. Participants felt like they had a sense of purpose, and there were established clear and rational triage protocols for consistency, resourceful modification of non-specialist facilities for short-term housing, and quite rapid movement of animals through the process of rescue, triage, and either subsequent release or transfer to an appropriate longer-term holding facility. Personnel in these facilities felt like their primary role to relieve suffering was acknowledged and appreciated. And despite limited equipment and facilities, the staff and volunteers felt supported and were rotated sufficiently frequently to avoid burnout. So exploring the themes in light of the One Welfare pillars, we clearly had an environment that had sustained landscape level damage with flora and fauna population and ecosystem changes. Natural resources were adversely impacted, air quality was poor, even in distant locations, and the heat oppressive. With respect to animal welfare, in addition to the fire-related harms, wild animals potentially suffered physical and psychological harms from capture, transport, examination, and temporary captivity, especially if the people involved were untrained. While some animals appeared to cope better than others, there has been little in the way of objective assessment of Australian wildlife welfare in rehabilitation settings, something that is just starting to be addressed. Only limited post-release monitoring was carried out, and so longer-term welfare of many victims is largely unknown. For the well-being of the humans, the work was challenging and yet rewarding. It was a stressful time for many citizens, and there was a deep sense of camaraderie. In any emotionally charged multi-agency response involving large numbers of passionate volunteers, interpersonal conflicts are unavoidable. Disappointingly, there were reports of serious bullying within and between groups of responders at some locations, with fragile egos and the temptation of self or group promotion impairing cooperation. There were a number of cross-element issues too that impacted on 2 or all 3 of the One Welfare pillars. Ethical conflicts were encountered with strong differences of opinion in how animals should be treated or supported. In equivocal situations, in hindsight, there was recognition that some animals were treated in order to keep the group's morale going, rather than a decision made strictly on welfare grounds. Public praise for apparent demonstrations of heroic selflessness and compassion was intense. The global media and social media attention appeared to play a role, and some regrettable publicity situations clearly showed a lack of consideration for animal welfare. Examples include delaying urgent medical care for photo opportunities, and some recovered animals being withheld from release for organised publicity. The unfamiliar and sudden influx of funding to a sector that had previously struggled to generate much public financial support meant that much needed cash was available for veterinary interventions and desperately needed upgrades to facilities. But there was an unrealistic expectation that the increased funding would equate to the ability to save everything, regardless of prognosis. Media attention and emotional attachments exacerbated this and may have, in some cases, clouded judgment. There was a desperate hunger for a good news story. In reality, euthanasia of many victims was appropriate, but rarely reported and strained relationships. There have been some really exciting developments in preparing our next time strategy. These include the planning of wildlife response teams, a trial of a televet service to provide remote expert veterinary advice to general practice vets or rehabilitators isolated by disaster, research grants awarded to investigate prognostic factors for fire-affected wildlife, the rollout of training programs for vets, vet nurses and wildlife carers, and revisions of the codes of practice and guidelines, and there is still much to do. So in conclusion, the Black Summer fires demonstrated the inextricable connectedness of community, the environment, and wildlife welfare. The collective sense of ecological grief and climate distress reverberated around the world, and as demonstrated, can impact disaster response. Unintended animal welfare harms can result from well-meaning actions to rescue and rehabilitate wild animals, and future natural disaster preparedness plans would benefit from taking a one welfare approach. I'd like to acknowledge Taronga Conservation Society for supporting this work and providing many of the images used in this presentation, the Australian Veterinary Association and Vets Beyond Borders for providing the platforms to begin these important discussions. And I take my hat off to everyone that selflessly raised their hand to help in whatever capacity was most needed during the fires and who retained their sense of integrity and professional judgment in what was such an overwhelmingly stressful time. I'm particularly grateful to those who have openly shared their experiences in order for us to move forward. Thank you so much for your attention, and I welcome any comments, questions, or thoughts you may have.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Virtual clap for you. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you so much, Michelle. The truth is that we don't have, oh yeah, we have a question, sorry. I thought we didn't have any, but we have a question that we will try to respond to answer. It's a problem that we are observing in the whole world. We have had in Argentina a lot of problems with fires, in Canada too, in the Amazonas. So the truth is that the reality is quite bad. We are a little bit delayed, Michelle, and if you can answer to the questions in writing using the chat, I would really appreciate it, because we have to move on with the next presentation that is going to be about the welfare of donkeys using in the protection of the environment in Karachi and in Pakistan. This presentation is going to be delivered by Sher Nawaz from Brooke in Pakistan. You have the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Sher Nawaz, working in Brooke, Pakistan as regional manager in Karachi region. I'm also part of research team of Brooke, Pakistan. Brooke is a welfare organization working for welfare of working horses, donkeys, and mules. The organization is working for empowerment of equine owning communities that depend on these animals for their livelihood. We work in bricklanes, coal mine, and workplace communities, engaging equine owner users, their women and children, and all stakeholders that they have linked with these animals directly or indirectly. Brooke works in collaboration and partnership with government organizations and non-government organizations. As Brooke believes on evidences and its theory of change based on best available evidences under dedicated management team, Brooke research team carried out our research on the role of donkeys in waste management and environmental protection in Karachi. Mostly in low and middle income countries, equates the donkeys, horses, and mules play a critical role in supporting communities in their livelihood. In Karachi, more than 25,000 equids are used for transportation of building materials and other commercial produce. And out of these animals, 2,500 donkey cars are used for garbage management. Equine ownership is a common income generating strategy in Pakistan. Being a metropolitan city, Karachi is one of the largest cities of Pakistan, growing population of more than 24 millions. Nearly 14,000 tons of solid waste are produced on daily basis. In Pakistan, the management of solid waste is often inefficient. Approximately only 60% of solid is collected. Despite of significant role in waste management, donkeys received little attention. On left side in the picture, you can see a street in Karachi with heaps of garbage thrown away in the street. And on the other side, the picture is one of the landfill in Karachi. There are 4 landfills in Karachi that are considered not enough. The primary objective of the study was to assess the role and welfare of cart donkeys used in waste management in Karachi, while the secondary aim of the study was to understand the challenges that community face to help at the development of appropriate and applicable interventions and use of findings to engage with potential partners to identify area of mutual collaboration and partnership in animal and welfare, poverty alleviation, waste management, and environmental safety. Cart donkey driven management system is shown in these pictures. From right, you can see the donkey cart owners collecting non-recyclable and recyclable garbage from houses of their respective areas. Then in the next picture, the non-recyclable waste is thrown in dumping areas, while recyclable items are picked by owners and transported to their houses. In next picture, the recyclable materials are categorized and then sell out to respective vendors. In methods, 200 donkey cart owners were interviewed for the data on donkey health and welfare and the participants' role in collecting waste. 50 households were asked for preferred waste disposal method, way of obtaining waste disposal services, and available alternatives. 8 municipality workers and 6 health service providers were interviewed as key informant. The information gathered on common clinical presentation seen and the animal health care practitioner relationship with donkey cart owners. 204 donkeys of same owners were assessed using a standardized equine-based welfare assessment tool. Both written and verbal consent acquired prior to information gathering from the stakeholders involved in this study. In left side, the research team seeking consent from donkey cart owner in field. On the right side in the picture, research team gathering information from donkey cart owners in a pre-developed and approved questionnaire. These pictures showing household owners and municipality workers interviews by research team. The result of the study revealed that collection on waste was the primary source of income for 89% of donkey owners. On daily basis, each donkey cart transported on average 1,000 kg of non-recyclable waste and 100 kg recyclable waste. Household preferred donkey cart for removal of waste, and 100% of them responded a huge garbage built up if donkey cart became unavailable, which would have a huge environmental impact. Many household members, including men and children, are involved in waste collection. There are women involved in categorization of the recyclable items in their houses. 62% of waste collectors were reported to be under 18-year-old. The welfare of donkey used in waste collection was reported to be poor, with 78% suffering from malpractices like muzzle mutilations and 67% with knee lesions. Several welfare issues were identified during the study. In the pictures, you can see few animal and human welfare issues like hebronymiosis and muzzle mutilation and other malpractices in case of animals. In case of human, acid chemical burn cases can be seen. Finding of the research brought in use, and Brook Pakistan organized a policy brief launch with name of Silent Helpers on role of donkey carts in waste management of Karachi. The objective of this launch was to share the key findings of the study done by Brook on waste picker communities with all the relevant stakeholders. Among NGOs like HANDS, Pakistan Agriculture Foundation, Pakistan Animal Welfare Society, Gulbaha, and among international NGOs like IUCN, WWF, UNCIEF, and government departments like Sindh Solid Waste Management Board, Livestock Department, local government and municipal corporation, the representative of media, and the elected representatives attended this event. It provides a platform for all the relevant stakeholders to discuss the issues of solid waste management, and communities engage this waste collection in Karachi to come up with some concrete recommendation to improve lives of these waste packer communities as well as environment. In the event's closing remark by Mr. Mahfouz Yar, a legislator, was the event chief guest on behalf of Mayor Karachi. He really appreciated the efforts of Brook to highlight the role of waste picker communities in Karachi waste management system. He showed his full support for Brook initiatives and said, "I will become voice for the needy donkeys on a community as they have been playing significant role in cleaning the city." He also assured to facilitate the solid waste management at all union council level for integrated waste in the city. In the result of policy brief, the recommendations were enlisted: government recognition of the services of waste collectors, including donkey cart owners, government and non-government organizations working on environmental, human, and animal welfare issues need to join hands and empower communities, inclusion of equine in animal welfare laws, practical health and safety training program for people engaged in waste collection, like occupational trainings, integrated waste management system should be in place, child labor must be prohibited, and school enrollment needs to be encouraged. The livestock department should provide animal health services to communities. We have concluded our study with these conclusions that donkeys and owners play a huge role in the waste management system in Karachi. There are a number of human and animal welfare concerns associated with waste management system. Previous public investment in waste management has failed because they are not taken the informal sector in account. Results of this study have been shared with government officials and non-government organizations working directly or indirectly in the waste management system. Role of donkeys is to be acknowledged in public planning exercises and appropriate public resource allocated to these communities and their animals. In case anybody wants to know in detail about this study, the article, The Role and Welfare of Cars Donkey in Waste Management in Karachi may be referred. This article is published in Animals Journal MPDI. The article covered all details, including human-animal issues, people involved, type of solid waste, etc. This study is very unique and highlighted the importance of donkeys and their owning communities. Through this study, the policymakers are being sensitized for allocation of resources. I am thankful for all the participants for their listening. Thank you very much. Any question, please? My other colleagues involved in this study also present for your response.
Muchas gracias, Cher.
Thank you very much. We don't have questions, but we will send them if we receive them. So check the app because there will be questions, I'm sure. The topic is really interesting, but we're running out of time, so we need to continue. But if you receive the questions, please answer them once you get them. So our next speaker is the last oral presentations. Time flies by. And this is our last oral presentation in session 5. It's by Andrea Sartorius from the University of Nottingham in the UK. And it's a multidisciplinary approach to the impact of trace metal contamination from derelict lead mines in Wales. So I'm going to leave you the floor. She's not going to be here for Q&As, but you can send them and she will answer them in written form later on. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andrea Sartorius, and I'm a PhD candidate based at the University of Nottingham. My work focuses on a multidisciplinary approach to the impact of trace metal contamination from derelict lead mines in Wales. Trace metals are a class of naturally occurring elements, including lead, cadmium, zinc, copper, arsenic, and mercury. These metals are notable because of their relatively heavy mass and because they are potentially toxic at relatively low concentrations. Exposure to trace metals can impact almost every system in the body and can result in a variety of negative effects from inhibited growth, reduced fertility, shortened lifespan, immunosuppression, and cancer. In 2017, trace metal exposure in humans alone resulted in over 1 million deaths and over 24 million disability-adjusted life years worldwide. However, trace metals are also relatively abundant and malleable, so they have been used by humans throughout history. For example, lead was a key metal in many ancient civilizations, and more recently was extensively used in petrol and paint. Because of the intensive demand for trace metals, trace metal mining has been occurring for thousands of years. In the UK in particular, metal mining was common from before the Roman invasion. During the Industrial Age, when UK metal mining was at its peak, the UK was the world's primary producer of lead, tin, and copper. However, in the late 1800s to early 1900s, depletion of the mines and competition from abroad led to the industry's collapse. In Wales alone, this has led to over 1,400 abandoned metal mines. After the mines were closed, mine waste was left behind in the form of large spoil heaps. Spoil heaps contain high concentrations of trace metals and are often unstable and situated next to waterways, So wind and water erosion results in high concentrations of trace metals entering and spreading throughout the environment. So coming into this project, we had two primary objectives. First, to determine the distribution of trace metals at sites impacted by historic lead mining activities, and second, to understand the resulting impact on environmental, animal, and human well-being. Now, while this project examines a variety of trace metals, for brevity's sake, I will focus primarily on lead during this talk. Now, we chose to focus our study in mid-Wales, where trace metal contamination is still an ongoing issue. As you can see, the lead topsoil concentrations in that region are notably high. Now, we specifically chose to focus on sampling two derelict mine sites, which I will refer to as Mine A and Mine B for anonymization purposes. Both these mines were previous lead mines. They were both closed about 100 years ago, and they have waterways flowing through them directly past the spoil heaps. In both areas, we visited the mine site, as well as a private property directly downstream of the mine and a nearby control site. At each site, we collected environmental samples to determine the levels of contamination. We then trapped rodents and collected tissues to determine trace metal loads, and we opportunistically sampled from domestic animals and collected local food products as well. We found large-scale environmental trace metal pollution both at the mine sites and at areas downstream. While the mine sites were barren and very clearly contaminated, we also found high trace metal concentrations in areas that looked pristine and healthy. As you can see here, the soil samples that we collected at the mine sites and the private properties downstream of the mines had lead concentrations that were tens, if not hundreds of times higher than at the control site. The soil lead concentrations also consistently exceeded the Welsh soil normal background concentration, as found by the British Geological Survey. Now, this all indicates that the soil lead concentrations are much higher than you would normally expect to find in this region. We observed similar trends for the sediments, where sediment lead concentrations were again consistently tens to hundreds of times higher than those in the control sites. The sediment concentrations were also above the probable effect level threshold, above which adverse health effects to aquatic organisms living in the waterways are expected. This likely explains why there are no fish in the sampled streams, even though similar nearby streams do contain fish. We next trapped small rodents at the sites to determine if animals living in trace metal contaminated areas were taking up the trace metals into their bodies. We specifically examined kidney, liver, and bone, as trace metals are commonly sequestered in these three tissues. When we examined the lead concentrations in these three tissues, we found statistically significant differences depending on where the animal was collected. As you can see, for all three tissues, the highest lead concentrations were found at the mine sites, followed by slightly lower ones at the private property, and then almost negligible concentrations at the control sites. This clearly indicates that animals living on trace metal contaminated land do take up the trace metals into their bodies. But is this affecting their well-being? Well, we are currently working on addressing that in rodents, but we do have some evidence of negative impacts in domestic animals. First of all, a landowner living about 4 kilometers downstream of Mine A asked us to investigate 2 of their Indian runner ducks that had died of unknown causes. Now, upon post-mortem examination, we found that the ducks' tissue lead concentrations consistently greatly exceeded the threshold for severe clinical lead poisoning in birds. We also found liver tissue degradation and possible lead inclusion bodies, which are all indicative of lead toxicity. This all has led us to believe that these birds were adversely affected by their lead exposure. To investigate the effects on domestic animals further, we examined live animals living on a farm about 1 kilometer downstream of Mine B. We collected blood samples, which indicate lead exposure over a few weeks. All but the cat had elevated blood lead concentrations above 30 micrograms per liter, but only the chickens had a mean blood lead concentration indicating toxicity. It's important to note that one of the horses at this property had laryngeal hemiplegia, a disease which affects the upper airway. Even though this disease has been linked with lead exposure in the past, at the time of sampling, the horse's blood lead concentration was below the lead toxicity threshold. However, the horse's laryngeal hemiplegia continued to worsen over time, and eventually its quality of life became so bad that, unfortunately, it had to be put down. Afterwards, we examined the horse's liver and kidney and found lead concentrations that were elevated above the lead toxicity threshold in horses. It's therefore extremely important to remember that blood lead concentrations only provide a snapshot of current exposure, and can fail to indicate chronic lead exposure, even in very serious cases. Now, as I noted before, the chicken blood lead concentrations were also notably high. Upon further examination, we believe that the high blood lead concentrations are due to the chickens taking up the mine spoil from a nearby track as grit, therefore constantly exposing themselves to high lead concentration. The chickens' high blood lead concentrations made us curious about the possible lead concentration in the chickens' eggs. In particular, since the eggs were being produced for human consumption, we wondered whether they contained enough lead to pose a risk to humans. Upon examination of eggs from farms near the mine sites, we found high lead concentrations. Based on the European Food Safety Authority regulation on the maximum amount of eggs a human can consume per day before experiencing negative health effects, you could only eat around 2 of the eggs per day from either mine site. For comparison, you could eat well over 100 eggs from the supermarket before reaching this threshold. The duck eggs in Mine A, laid by ducks living in similar conditions to the ones we discussed earlier, had even higher lead concentrations, so eating even one would push you far over this lead intake threshold. After examining the eggs, we became curious if other food products produced downstream of the mine were also contaminated with lead. So we collected various vegetables from the gardens of private properties downstream of the mine sites. We found varying lead concentrations across the many different vegetables we sampled. However, of particular note, we found high lead concentrations in the marrow, rhubarb, and potatoes. Even after watching these vegetables, you can only eat in a day just over half a marrow, less than 2 rhubarb stems, and 5 very small potatoes before exceeding the IFSA lead daily intake threshold. However, it's also extremely important to note that many health organizations, including the World Health Organization, say that there is no level of exposure to lead that is known to be without harmful effects. Therefore, even eating 1 or 2 of those eggs or a couple potatoes a day is not a guarantee of safety when it comes to lead toxicity. To summarize, the key findings of this project are that there are high concentrations of trace metals both at and downstream of these mine sites, that trace metals are also present in high concentrations in wildlife, domestic animals, and domestic animal products, and that there are indications that high trace metal concentrations are negatively affecting the well-being of animal and human residents. This project is still ongoing, and the next big step is to investigate whether resident rodents are being impacted by their high trace metal loads. We will compare things like viral load, gut microbiome community, and immune function across rodents from contaminated and control sites to assess the potential impacts of trace metal exposure. We're also working on informing the public about the extent and possible effects of trace metal contamination. I would like to thank my supervisors, the undergraduate students who helped me in the field, the private landowners, my funders, the Envision Doctoral Training Partnership, and the University of Nottingham for their help and funding during this project. Thank you very much for listening to my talk. Please feel free to ask any questions or email or message me on Twitter after the presentation. And if you're interested and want to learn more, I've included a QR code that links to a short animation explaining my research and its implications. Thank you again.
Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. The truth is that we don't have any questions by far, but I want to just remind you, because we have 1 minute left, that you can, the speakers can check if in the chat you have questions in the application, if there are some questions, and you can answer later if you want. Well, there are no questions, but the truth is that all the presentations were very interesting. The truth is that the last presentation was very interesting, and it is a pleasure that you are doing this type of work, this type of research, because it's very important for human and animal welfare and well-being. Now it is the moment that we wanted to go to the awesome session, the OWSM sessions. I'm glad to listen to the music that opens up this beautiful session.
Bueno,
Well,
muy bien. Entonces vamos a empezar con
great. We are going to start with the first presentation, which is going to be about the disaster response using One Health solutions, case studies, Hurricane Sandy, Joplin tornado, and COVID-19. This presentation is going to be delivered by Michelle Grundal from George Mason University, the US.
Animal disasters. We'll consider Hurricane Sandy, the Joplin tornado, and COVID-19. We'll review the preparedness, prevention, response, and recovery for emergencies affecting animals using One Welfare solutions. We'll plan for the whole family. Due to a massive hurricane, there is a flood. The water is full of toxic chemicals and septic overflow, so walking through it will be dangerous. The water is rising, but the authorities say that they will not let pets onto the rescue boats. The people won't evacuate without their pets because of the relationship that they have with them. Is this a One Welfare issue? We see that they have one dog and one cat. So who can help? Who should help? What would you do? So people who could help might be animal control, Red Cross, emergency management, agriculture, universities. Maybe it's veterinarians or humane groups or farmers or kennels. Maybe it's the fire department. You might also be working with the sheriff or police, public health department, some policymakers, maybe some politicians, and of course the pet owners. So it looks like this could be turning into something that could be useful if there was multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary, and interdisciplinary ways to work together. Let's watch this video.
That's okay, but there's a bunch of there. That's what it gets close to do. Okay, hold. You give us room. Hold. Keep out the pressure.
A lot of different people involved here with a lot of different skill sets. So why do we prepare for and respond to animal-related disasters? We want to facilitate a prompt, effective response because we know around 60% of households in the United States have at least one pet, probably two. We also want to educate the public. And most importantly, we want to decrease the health and safety threats to humans and animals when the environment becomes hazardous. We want to also minimize the economic impact of emergencies like this. We can provide safe shelter for pets during emergencies, and this also helps us decrease the spread of disease. So we minimize the animal and human suffering during emergencies by responding to disasters. Minimizing the safety risks for humans and animals through pet-friendly housing and evacuation plans makes a difference. And we know that the human-animal bond affects human behavior and animal behavior. So in 2012, we saw that Hurricane Sandy caused power outages and flooding in a few major cities. So we opened emergency sheltering that was co-located with the Red Cross because we had previous mass care planning efforts with them. So we told people that they could bring their pets to some of these human shelters. This would allow them to maintain their emotional connection with their pets. And it worked out pretty well. There was some difficulty, but it was okay. Not like Hurricane Katrina in 2005, where many, many people lost their lives. And a lot of animals died too. This was because the authorities just wouldn't let pets onto the boats and buses. So what did we learn? We know that emergency management plans only work when people want to follow them. If people can't take their pets with them, they might choose to stay in the danger zone. So this man just lost everything in a tornado, but he still has his dog. If we can promise him that we'll take care of his pet so that he can go to the emergency human shelter, he can get some food and get some sleep. If we can house his pet, we can help maintain their relationship. They need each other, especially during this terrifying time. Their health and wellness will be supported if we can help by doing things like sheltering pets and caring for the whole family. The picture on the left shows what an emergency domestic pet shelter looks like. Using One Welfare approaches can create optimal well-being for the humans and the animals involved. The previous pictures were from the Joplin tornado of 2011. An F5 tornado hit the town of Joplin, Missouri, and the entire town was devastated. The Joplin Humane and the ASPCA had set up emergency pet sheltering, and this was located right near the Joplin Humane's facility. There were warehouses available to be used. Emergency animal responders managed these warehouse shelters. There were 3 buildings that housed about 1,000 pets. Around 800 animals were adopted in July of 2011. And the reason this was so successful is that there were different people working together to do things like not only care for the animals, but also communicate with the public. So these positive welfare outcomes were because of public relations and communication solutions that were a one welfare solution. So early February, March of last year, we started to wonder, are we going to be seeing a zoonotic disaster? Are pets going to be getting sick? Will large amounts of people become hospitalized or ill? Will there be lots of pets that now need homes who are recently exposed to COVID-19? And also, what infection control procedures and emergency protocols and kennel plans are we really going to need? So here's the response that we did. So we looked at identifying kennels where we could create partnerships. We worked with our emergency management locally. I live in southeastern Pennsylvania, so this is for my region specifically. We identified ways that we could work safely in kennels if we needed to use them. So we came up with some protocols and some plans. And we also wondered how we were going to deal with the resource challenges of PPE. COVID-19 was really an economic disaster. We were seeing that human economic disruption causes vulnerability and food insecurity for pets and their owners. So were shelters going to be receiving more animals due to these economic hardships? So here's the response that we did. We created pet food donation channels and systems. We created new relationships with the human food pantries. And we also created relationships with those who are doing drive-through food donations. So we would come along behind them and provide pet food to people who are picking up food. The picture you see here is not from my region, but it looks exactly like what we were saying. And what's exciting about this is that a lot of these pet food pantry relationships are now going to continue and be sustainable even after this pandemic is gone. So we're seeing some resilience. So what's the common thread for all of these disasters? We know that the human-animal bond was certainly exposed. We know that there were plans for mass care. We know that many animals got adopted. We also know that emergency managers and the government now better understand the importance for planning for the whole family. After Katrina, the United States passed a law for the transport of pets during disasters. And we also know that environmental damage, shared threats, and vector control is important. We need to look at the root causes for a lot of these disasters. And we also know that interdisciplinary solutions seem to be working. If we look at health, housing, behavior, mental health, and economics, these are all areas that we need to consider when we're looking at disaster response. And disaster response usually changes from what you think it's going to be when the disaster starts. So it's interesting to see how things just might end up. It could be unexpected. So what about future disasters? Are we going to see more natural pandemics or bad weather? Could climate change exacerbate this? What if the next influenza is truly a pandemic influenza? And what about terrorism? Could there be bioterror or agroterror? Do you know how to decontaminate a cow or save our crops or food supply from disruptions? What we do know is not all disasters will need a One Health approach, but many of them are really a natural fit for it because we use systems thinking and transdisciplinary solutions. So what can you do if you're interested in this? You can plan in advance so that you're ready to help others. If you and your pets are ready and prepared, you'll be able to go out and do all the things that need to be done to help other people and animals during disasters.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias. Excelente.
Thank you very much. This was brilliant. I think that first image in the presentation, that roof, this amount of human, this amount of animals in this household, I think that image tells a whole story and tells the story of the bond that humans and animals feel during these natural disaster situations. I think this has been an amazing presentation. But now we have with us the next presentation by Leonardo Arias Bernal from Uniagraria, Colombia. And this is the One Welfare for the Andean Bear perspective from Colombia. Leonardo, are you ready?
Hola, mi nombre es Sue y hoy vengo a contarles un cuento acerca de mi historia y de muchos otros osos que como yo viven en Colombia.
This is a tale about me as a bear, as many other bears that live in Colombia. I live in the Andean mountains and I'm the only species that lives in this part of the world. Specifically, I live in Colombia and this tale is taking place here. In this place, my home is located. It's a wasteland, it's a moor, it's a wonderful place located in the center of the country. This is a picture of the place where I live. It's a place where there are wastelands, water, woods, forests, and many other animal species. There are deers, birds, many species of plants, and a great friend, the condor. There are many people around the area, human beings, that do not understand that I really have necessities, that I'm looking for refugee, that I need food. And that's why many times I find cows. And cows are really very easy to eat. And sometimes I eat them, and sometimes I find them dead, and I also eat them. I really love corn, for example, is delicious, but people think that I am a bad animal, and that's why many of my friends are being killed, and that's why my story begins. Many researchers have helped me. Many people say I am important because in the place where I live, there is a lot of water. In the place where I live, it's the National Tingasa Park. It's a place of more than 76,000 hectares with a lot of water that is very important for 80% of the Bogota citizens. And it also provides water to 11 municipalities. Most of this water is for 2 hydroelectric factories that are part of the electric production center of the country. As you can see, this wasteland is a very good place, an important place for everybody. This one welfare model is very important to me. If I am protected, many other species can be protected as well, among them human beings. Researchers that I found one day have been doing a very interesting job with the people in the communities where I live. And that's how many people even don't know that I exist. And researchers have shown that I exist and that I am not that bad. It is very important to talk about the work of the researchers. That's why many people paint my houses with my image, because I am important. Many people think that I am important and that they can be in a very good place with me. The researchers that I found once wanted to investigate about bears, and I made sure that they had the necessary experience. That's why I tried to make sure that they knew what they were doing. They want to apply anesthesia and to get me into a sleep status, to review my nails, my teeth, as you can see on the slides. The study was developed also with other species, other animals victims of fauna trafficking, which is also affecting my species. Many people think that I have healing powers or properties, and I'm just a bear. I'm just an animal. Some people think that we are different and also put us into zoos. That's why I made sure that the researchers who were my friends had the necessary experience. Their knowledge was very important. They wanted to study me in the place where I really live, where I currently live. They didn't know exactly where I was, and I began to show them where I was, where I lived. It was very tough for me. Then I was given a kind of house of books. I didn't know how to use it. I went in sometimes, I went out, I used it to scratch my back. It was wonderful to feel that box on my back. But then I understood that they wanted me to get into the house in there. And that's why I entered there once. I didn't like the experience much, to be honest. I was thrown a dart and it felt like a needle. I began to feel dizzy and I don't know what happened next. I was shown some photographs and I realized that they wanted to know how I was living. The important thing, therefore, is that I was given this necklace, and this necklace helped the researchers to track me, to monitor me. Human beings do not like to walk as much as I like because I move around all the wasteland, the moor, and then I was taken some samples to check that I was healthy. And they also started to analyze the data obtained from my necklace, and in 1 month the truth is that I can't run around a fourth of the area where I live. It's also interesting to know that I don't have any borders in mind, and I don't know which is the area that is protected by the environmental authorities. And I go out from the conservation area, and that is not good. Outside my area, there are people who think that I'm not very good. So this gave information to the researchers to know what to do with my species. The results are quite good. The truth is that this is a wonderful place for me with a huge area. This is a video of one of my cousins, of one of my friends, who uses these cameras to scratch her back. And my cousin is not alone. Look at her baby, who really love playing like human beings. I like to do what my cousins do too. I like playing. In this video, you can see a big bear, another friend of mine, looking to the horizon because he knows that what researchers are doing help our species and our home, and with that, we can also help human beings. Since there is nothing more important than working in teams, I can also just call or name the organizations that have made this project possible and how this ends. This is the end of my story, but it's not. The final has not yet come. The story is going to continue in the future, analyzing other places and other species as well. As we say in Colombia, the final has almost ended. Bye-bye. Oh, thank you very much for your excellent presentation. It is really one of these awesome sessions and presentation. But now we are going to listen to the Belgium presentation with the challenges to include and implement one welfare policy in reptile keeping. Claire Diederich is going to be the speaker here from the University of Namur, Belgium. So you have the floor.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Claire Diederich, and I'm the president of the Walloon Animal Welfare Council in Belgium. And I would like to present you our experience and the challenge we met to include and implement one welfare policy in reptile keeping. Belgium is a small country in Europe, and there was Federal Animal Welfare Council until the 6th reform of the state in 2015, where the animal welfare matter has been given to the 3 radios of Belgium. So there are now 3 animal welfare councils in my country, in Flanders, the north part of the country, at the centrum in Brussels, and in the south in Wallonia, where I am the president of that council. And our animal welfare minister requests the council to set up a positive list of reptiles whose detention by naive people would be authorized. The council organized a working group on that topic. That group worked about a year and produced a report that was transformed into an advice in 2017. And that report included a positive list of species, and the number was about 232 species from a data bank of more than 11,000 species. The criteria that were selected to decide or not to include or not one species were the easiness of housing the species, not only the habitat, but the size, the adult size of the animal, because you can imagine a snake of 10 meters long as adult, it is hard to properly house that kind of animal. Some species present stress sensitivity to handling or moving, for example. Another criteria was that the species must be safe for human handling, and this explains why dangerous animal species were discarded. The next criteria was also to have enough documentation available to inform the future owner about the needs or the housing conditions of the species he wanted to buy. It was at the second instance also looked to ensure, nevertheless, the protection of some endangered species via the establishment of stud books. It means recording the specimens held by those owners into stud books to be able to trace those specimens. The included species can be fed with dead animals. So the use of living animals is an exception in our understanding. There are also compulsory environmental licenses to be requested, and with the simplified procedures to those species from the positive list. This list also concerns animals born and bred in captivity only. And this point also is to be applied from animals coming from abroad. No indigenous species from Wallonia are included into this positive list to prevent people to collect some wild specimens and put them possibly in danger. And finally, the taxonomy that we use comes from the reptile database mentioned here. I provide you now a few examples of those accepted or rejected species. For snakes, in example, the Burmese python was not easy to handle because it becomes very long at the adult age. The Eastern racer was too sensitive and related to stress and has a poor health maintenance in captive conditions. And the Jamaican boa, for example, is an endangered species, so it was also discarded. To the other side, the corn snake was considered easy to handle, not vulnerable, and with not so exposed to health problems, and not endangered. About tortoise, The Nile soft-shell tortoise was discarded because it's an aquatic animal and it's very hard to realize the appropriate housing conditions for that species. The diamond-back terrapin and the mata-mata have particular requirements concerning their habitat conditions or the food and the available of food for that species. So they were discarded. But the box tortoise is easy to house, to feed, and to be provided with correct housing conditions. So this tortoise is included into the list. About lizards, Savannah monitor was discarded because it was a danger for human handling and health. And according to our experts, the Machiluetre leaf-tailed gecko was an unknown species, so very few documentation available, and this was also discarded from the list. To the other side, the bearded dragon was included. There were also additional conditions for several species. 11 lizard species are requested to receive a veterinary visit of their housing conditions before being the owner is accepted to keep them. This is for the example for the green iguana or the chlamydosaur. About tortoise, there are an additional condition beside the veterinary clinic, the veterinary visit of the housing conditions. It's also requested that a stud book is established and those animals be registered in the stud book. Examples from those tortoise species are presented here with the China box tortoise and the Egyptian one. So you see at the Walloon level, the process to implement one welfare policy in reptile keeping was the following: establishment, settlement of the working group, producing a report, presented to the Walloon Animal Welfare Council, which turned it into an advice. And then with that advice, the Walloon government produced a decree which entered into force at the beginning of this year. And since there had been an appeal lodged by the Belgian Council of the State, which is an administrative court in legislative and regulatory matters, coming from or introduced by a reptile farmer or shopkeeper who is considering that this decree and this restricted number of allowed species put his business in danger. I show you how Belgium is a small country, and each of its area is rather smaller. So that's the argument that the farmer used. So, as you see, in Wallonia, there is a positive list of 232 species. What about Flanders? Flanders also produced a positive list from the work of another working group made of different people. So they produced a positive list made of 422 species. Most of them include our species or species from the Walloon list. And the Brussels area considered this topic not be a priority, so there is currently no positive list available. So this Belgian situation illustrates the global difficulty of establishing a one welfare concept, including the protection of the animals and the environment, as well as the protection of human beings, and in this sense, about the professional activity of some human beings, or illustrating the sensitivity of different areas in a country.
Bueno, muchas gracias.
Well, thank you. Another amazing presentation, I have to say. The topic about reptiles that you keep at home, keeping wild animals as pet, is also a big challenge that we face. And it's also very important to assess it and to do it inside the One Welfare framework, because there's zoonotic risk, there are the risk of accidents, because it's difficult to be able to provide an adequate welfare for the animals because they are kept in captivity in a home. And also, it's good to talk about the fact that sometimes they are sold in illegal channels, and this can also create a problem in terms of protecting the biodiversity and the environment. So these are topics that we need to talk about. We need to assess them in these working groups. And I think that the OIE has been already considering, after what has happened with the COVID-19 and the potential zoonotic origin of this pandemic, to create a legal framework that will regulate this kind of trade. So this is a very interesting point of view, and we're almost there. This was the last awesome session, presentation. You can vote the ones that you really like. Oh. We have, I'm sorry, I was missing one. I forgot there was another one. I'm so sorry. I have to wake up at 3 in the morning and I'm so sleepy. But we still have another one, which is the presentation by Samantha Oper. I'm sorry, Samantha, forgive me. I forgot about it. I was so tired, but we have to talk about One Welfare, increasing community involvement, a case study from Kenya. And Samantha Opere will be talking in behalf of the Kenya Network for Dissemination of Agricultural Technologies. Sorry, Samantha.
Hello, I'm Samantha Opere, and I'm a veterinarian working in Kenya. The title of my presentation is One Welfare, Increasing Community Involvement and Actions, a case study from Nyandarua and Nakuru counties in Kenya. This is a joint project between KENDAT, Brook East Africa, and Farming Systems Kenya. The three organizations aim at improving the welfare of working donkeys as well as community livelihoods. So just in case, One Welfare is a concept that provides a more holistic approach when looking at human well-being, animal welfare, and the environment. So my colleagues and I wondered whether there were any real-life examples of One Welfare. So we sought to answer the question, is there a link between donkeys, their owners, and the forests they live near? But let's start with the donkeys. Donkeys are mainly used for transportation purposes in Kenya. In semi-arid areas, they're used by women to transport water and firewood. In agricultural areas, they're used to transport farm produce like milk, vegetables, and rice. And in urban areas, they're used by youth for commercial purposes, to transport water, construction material like sand and ballast, and even offer moving services. But also, donkeys transport feed for other livestock, and they even transport the other livestock. Kind of reminds me of George Orwell's The Animal Farm. Anyway, research and interest in donkeys has been quite limited. So in the past, sadly, donkeys that were sick and injured would be abandoned by their owners, mainly because they didn't have the knowledge and skills to care for their donkeys. So Brook, through its partners, did a baseline survey to identify the welfare issues among donkeys. After that, they identified training needs, which mainly covered animal welfare, donkey handling, and husbandry practices like nutrition, handling, harnessing, and parasite control. Overall, the welfare of donkeys in Nyandarua and Nakuru counties has improved from 63 to 72% between 2017 and 2021. Donkeys in good welfare work better and are better able to support their owner's livelihood. Income generated from the work done with the donkeys is used to meet basic needs like food and rent, and it's also used for school fees, and to pay for healthcare costs and any investment ideas. Donkeys also get nutrition, vet care, and shelter. Donkey owners were faced with another challenge. Donkeys were not able to get enough feed to match the energy requirements. Rainfall patterns were becoming more unpredictable. Crop failure each year was on a rise, and food sources for humans and animals were becoming more and more scarce. Why? Well, Kenya's forest cover is rapidly depleting. These are images of Mau Forest, Kenya's largest water tower, which covers Nyandarua and other counties. The forest is under threat from human encroachment, charcoal burning, forest fires from charcoal burning, and illegal logging. This kind of destruction has contributed to climate change. A total of 557 donkey owners organized themselves into community forest associations. 60% were women and 40% men. The community forest associations partnered with the Kenya Forest Service to engage in conservation activities aimed at increasing the forest cover by 10%. In the agreement, the association is allocated 1 to 2 acres of land in the permanent nursery section of the forest. They are tasked to grow indigenous and exotic tree seedlings. They also allocated land in the conservation sites within the forest. So they're tasked to plant a minimum of 200,000 seedlings per year. A healthy environment is one which is protected from degradation. A healthy environment is a source of human wellness. That's not all. It doesn't end when trees are planted. The association is tasked to nurture the seedlings until they are mature. As they nurture the seedlings, they're allowed to grow crops like cabbage and carrots. They're further allowed to grow fodder for their livestock, and donkeys are allowed to graze in areas where the trees are mature. Once the trees are mature, they're moved to another conservation site. Donkeys also care for the forest by providing manure and carrying seedlings to the conservation sites. Motor vehicles are not allowed in these areas. That's why donkeys are the best. Now let's talk about money. They say money doesn't grow on trees. Well, income earned from the sale of seedlings and income earned from the work done by donkeys is put in a big pot. The owners then, based on the learnings that they had from the book, decided to be setting aside some money for quality veterinary services. They are now able to afford and access services from qualified animal health practitioners who are keen on minimizing the risks of antimicrobial resistance, which is an issue. Yeah. The achievements. For the forest, over 3 million indigenous and exotic seedlings have been grown. 1 million trees have been planted with an 85% survival rate. Donkeys have benefited from improved welfare. Donkey owners have increased income from seedlings, sale of dairy products from cattle that are feeding well, and from the work done by donkeys. They also have reduced conflicts with forest personnel and other communities benefiting from the forest. But this is where the emphasis is, that for one welfare to be effective, professionals need to support communities to understand the interconnections between their well-being, animal welfare, and the environment. When communities take ownership and lead in conservation activities, good animal welfare practices, the adoption of one welfare becomes more sustainable. Thanks for watching.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much indeed. Samantha, for your presentation. I'm sorry because I was about to miss your presentation. And now, yes, let's remember that you have 30 minutes or 15 minutes until 1:30. You can vote to choose the best presentation or the presentation that you prefer. I know that your task is really difficult to decide which is the best, but thank you, Rebecca, too, for the invitation to moderate this session, this part. It's an honor for me to be here. I really thank you, the whole team that is helping and supporting me. And also thanks I want to thank the participants. Now, yes, we have the break, and then we will continue at the end the award ceremony. Bye-bye.